It's an institution.
Who's the guy
It
that's
is.
from Oslo?
I stopped counting.
Let's go, because we had some announcements and stuff.
Well, good morning.
Whoa, good morning.
Was that loud?
Booming voice.
I've been struggling with allergies, and does my voice sound off a little?
Sounds like you're about to sing. Baritone.
Well, good morning again, and welcome to this Metro Plan Orlando CSC meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Jeffrey Campbell, and I will be chairing the meeting today. Today's meeting is fully in person, so all committee members have been asked to be present in the Metro Plan Orlando boardroom. We still have virtual public participation. I'll ask all committee members to please speak clearly and use the microphone so those joining us virtually can hear. It is now time for our pledge, and I will personally lead the pledge today. And I will also allow for a moment of silence or a moment of personal time for everyone across the country, but from Buffalo to California, and most recently, Southern Texas. Okay? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There are two public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who are here in person and would like to make a comment should submit a speaker card to Ms. Lisa Smith. Those attending on Zoom who want to speak can use the raise hand feature on Zoom screen. We also accepted comments by email before the meeting. At the May 11th Metro Plan Orlando meeting, I shared the summary of the committee's concerns about the Turnpike Widening Project study. The board does not normally see or hear PD&E studies. I thought that it was going to be on the agenda. In fact, in the presentation, it listed the board as hearing that project, but that was just their listing, so the board normally doesn't hear those. I urge them to take note of the project as it moves through the system and to remember and please be aware of all the points that we had raised in the discussion. The board approved the amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program dealing with the Hicks Avenue extension, which was approved by the CAC in April. The board also approved an emergency TIP amendment dealing with I-4 at Darrell Carter Parkway, which was added to the agenda after our April meeting. The emergency approval was necessary to keep the project construction contract on schedule. A copy of this amendment and letter is in your additional general information. We have a full meeting today with presentations, and I want to make sure that we're always respectful of everyone's time. So after the presentations, I'm going to ask again, and I know we've said this, and you'll probably hear it again in the announcements, turn your card up so that we can recognize you. And as we get into the questioning, I will ask for you to put your card up immediately after the presentation. And I will make a pass around the room, and when we're done, we won't go back. Okay, so if you have a question during the presentation, you can put it up. But I will recognize at the end of the presentation, put your card up. Okay, and I will recognize. Now, we want everyone to have the ability to ask their questions. So we've come up with a way that if you did not get recognized to have an opportunity to ask a question, you got an additional question, we will get that done for you. Okay?
Absolutely.
At this point, I'll ask Ms. Mary Ann Horn to recognize, give us our agenda review.
Thank you, Chairman Campbell. Committee members, everybody attending in the room, online. We want everyone to feel comfortable as you participate in our in-person meetings. If you have any concerns, please let me know so we can address it. In this format, as I think you know, we need to have a quorum. That's now 17 members in the room to conduct votes. As always, it is important to RSVP for our meeting so that we can prepare. There are still Zoom and YouTube options that are available for the public, and we encourage members of the public to remain virtual if they can. Today, we begin an annual process that many of you have been through, but it will be unfamiliar for some of our newer members. You will hear preview presentations on our upcoming $3 billion Transportation Improvement Program, which is our 5-year work program, and also on our prioritized project list, which is a ranking of unfunded projects. This is a lot of information. So you will get the preview today. Next month at your meeting, that same information will return to you as an action item to recommend to the board, which will vote on it in July. And on June 20th, as a bonus, right before your next meeting, there will be a virtual public meeting, which you are welcome to attend, but certainly not obligated to attend. There, the public will see a similar presentation to the ones that you've seen, and they'll have a chance to ask questions. And we'll be sharing more detail. That will be on virtual. That will be on Zoom, and we'll be sharing information on how to register for that if you want to. Now, in addition, we have 2 more interesting presentations today, which means our schedule is very full, as the chairman said. I have asked Chairman Campbell to keep an eye on the clock throughout our questions and discussions so that we can be respectful of everyone's time. That may mean that we need to put a cap on questions or comments at some point if we're running long. But I want to assure you that I am here to help you get answers to all your questions. We will leave no question behind. You are welcome to send me any unanswered questions that you have after the meeting. I will work with the presenters, get the information, and send the answer out to the whole committee. So I would suggest that we do it this way so that everybody gets the same information and we don't have any sunshine issues. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my announcements. There are no changes to the agenda. I would like to ask Ms. Lisa Smith to please call the roll.
Good morning. I'll ask all committee members to keep your microphones off until called. Beltran,
Here.
Bobinger,
Here.
Bosley, Buttery, Campbell, Coleman,
Here.
Cologne, Cortez,
Here.
Council, Davis, El Badri,
Present.
Henry, Lassard, Lizaswan, Longville, Lopez, McMullen,
Present.
Mormon, Mott,
Present.
Mueller,
Present.
O'Hanlon,
Here.
Peters,
Here.
Pigram, Pizzo,
Present.
Rumpf, Saavedra, Salas, Shaw, Sabilla,
Present.
Stevens,
Here.
Torrealba, Webster,
Here.
White.
Present.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum physically present.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Smith. We will now hear public comments on action items. Do we have anyone online who would like to speak to any of the items? If so, please use the raise hand function on your screen or press *9 on your telephone keypad. When you see your name pop up, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept the prompt to activate your microphone. We will ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold your comments to 2 minutes. Are there any comments at this time?
There are no comments on the virtual side.
Okay. Do we have anyone present in the boardroom today who wish to comment on action items?
We have not received any speaker cards.
Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
Mr. Chair, we did not receive any written comments prior to the meeting.
Okay. We only have one action item today. I'll ask for a motion and a second, then open the floor for discussion. Members making a second or the motion, please state your name and address for the record. The first item is the approval of the CAC minutes from our April 22nd meeting, and you'll find those in tab 1. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve, Chairman.
I have a motion
I'll second that.
and a second.
Stevens.
Any discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. We have 4 presentations today, which we mentioned earlier, makes for a very, very full schedule. We will hold questions until each presentation ends. Committee members, please stand your card up on the end, and we will signal that you will be recognized. Our first presentation has to do with the draft Transportation Improvement Program. Mr. Keith Caskey of Metro Plan Orlando staff will present the information. Mr. Caskey?
Okay, well, good morning. Just wanted to give you all a preview of our new fiscal year 2023 to 27 Transportation Improvement Program. And as Mary Ann mentioned earlier, this will be coming back at your meeting next month as an action item. And on your agenda, there's a link where you can review some of the main sections of the new draft TIP. I wanted to start off with a brief overview. A lot of you are pretty familiar with this, some of you aren't. But the TIP is one of the main documents that we as an MPO are required to produce based on federal and state legislation. And the purpose of it is to identify all the transportation projects that are funded in our region over the next 5 years with federal or state funds. So any federal or state funded transportation project has to be included in the TIP. And then we have the option to include locally funded projects in our document for information purposes. And we've always done that since those are important projects as well, and it gives a more complete picture. And then the TIP is updated on an annual basis. So we will be back about this time next year with a preview of another new TIP. Now this slide shows the amount of federal and state funds programmed over the 5 years of the TIP. And this is broken out by the main categories of projects in the document. And all of these federal and state funded projects have to be approved by our board to be included in the TIP in order for these projects to move forward and be implemented. And this amounts to over $3 billion worth of projects. Now the process of developing this TIP started last year when we put together our fiscal year 2027 to 35 prioritized project list. And the prioritized project list is another document that we update every year. And you'll be hearing Alex's preview of the new prioritized list in the next presentation. But this is the one from last year. And we like to call this a bridge document because it kind of fills in the gap between our long-range metropolitan transportation plan and the 5-year TIP. And it's split up into different categories. We have the highway projects, and then what's called the Transportation System Management and Operations, or TSMO projects. And for those of you that are new, the TSMO projects are relatively low cost, the total cost of maybe $4 to $5 million. And they're designed to help improve safety and traffic flow. They include projects like minor intersection improvements and technology-related projects like computerized traffic signals, dynamic message signs, infrastructure for autonomous vehicles, and so on. And then we have other lists of the bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects. And all the projects on these lists were ranked by priority as candidates for funding. And this was used by FDOT to develop their fiscal year 2023 to 27 tentative 5-year work program, and then we used the work program to put together this new TIP. I wanted to start off by looking at the highway projects that were in last year's prioritized project list. And these are divided into several different categories. We have the National Highway System projects, which are mainly the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate projects. And then there's also the truck parking project in the I-4 corridor. Then there's a state roadway system list, and this is a mixture of different types of projects. Some of these are widening projects that involve adding lanes to existing roads. But most of these are non-capacity, what we call complete streets projects, which help improve safety and traffic flow along a roadway corridor for all different modes of transportation. So they can include a combination of different types of improvements, whether it's minor intersection improvements, putting in sidewalks, bike lanes, bus pull-offs, depending on how much space is available. Then there's the off-system construction list, which is a list of mostly widening projects on local roads that are not on the state road system. And then there's also a list of complete streets projects, which are also on local roads. And on your agenda, there's also another link where you can review last year's prioritized project list, which I went through and updated to highlight those projects that have had significant changes since last year. So for this presentation, I'm mainly going to focus on those projects that have had major changes in the new TIP. So starting off with the National Highway System projects, again, these are mainly the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate projects and also the truck parking project. And the truck parking project had some funding program for construction in fiscal year 2026 in last year's TIP, and that was unchanged in the new TIP this year. And there weren't really any significant changes for the Beyond the Ultimate projects. But there were several interim projects that are being implemented on I-4 prior to the Beyond the Ultimate projects. And these were included in a group of TIP amendments that was approved late last year. And I just wanted to briefly review those. The first two are express lane projects that are both funded for construction in fiscal year 2022, in the current fiscal year. So these won't show up in the new fiscal year 23 to 27 TIP, but these will be getting underway in the near future. These include the 2 westbound express lanes on I-4 from west of State Road 528 to west of Kirkman Road, where they'll tie into the existing express lanes, and also includes an interchange improvement at Sand Lake Road. Then there's the westbound single buffer express lane from west of Central Florida Parkway to west of State Road 528. And this is the project they call the tube because it only has access at the beginning and the end of the express lane. There's no interim access. And then there's a similar single buffer express lane that's funded for construction in 2023. So this is included in the new TIP. And this is on I-4 from west of State Road 536 to west of Darrell Carter Parkway. And this phase is being funded with the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act federal stimulus funds. And then there are several interchange projects that are also funded for construction in 2023 with the ARPA funds. And 2 of these are interchange improvements in Orange County on I-4 at State Road 535 and State Road 528. And then there are 2 interchange operations projects in Seminole County on I-4 at County Road 46A and US 1792. Then we have the state road system projects. There were several projects on that list that have changes in the new TIP. The first two are the six-laning projects on East State Road 50. And these both had changes kind of in the negative sense. The six-laning of State Road 50 from Chuliota Road to State Road 520 was funded for construction in fiscal year 2025 in last year's TIP. And those funds were moved out beyond 2027. So these don't show up in the new TIP, and they won't until they're actually funded during the five-year timeframe of the TIP. And these were moved out because of cost increases for the project. And then there's the six-laning of State Road 50 from Avalon Park Boulevard to Chuliota Road. This was funded for construction in 2024 last year, and those funds were moved out 3 years to fiscal year 2027, again because of cost increases. Then we have the Complete Streets project on Orange Avenue from Clay Avenue to Fairbanks Avenue, and the safety improvement portion of this project from Clay Avenue to 1792 is now funded for construction in fiscal year 2024. The remainder of that segment from 1792 to Fairbanks Avenue is still unfunded at this point. Then there's the Complete Streets project on Robinson Street from Garland Avenue to Crystal Lake Drive in Orlando, and that's funded for construction in fiscal year 2024. And then there's a safety improvement project on Orange Avenue from Grant Street to Gore Street, and that's now funded for construction in fiscal year 2023. Then we have the off-system construction projects. Again, these are mainly widening projects on local roads. And I've got the project listed on the slide there. I'm not going to go through all these since none of these were funded in the new five-year work program. But these projects are all candidates for our federal funds as well as the State Transportation Regional Incentive Program funds. Then we have the Complete Streets projects. There were several projects on that list that have new phases funded in the TIP. Two of these are in Osceola County. We have the Complete Streets project on North Central Avenue from Dakin Avenue to Donegan Avenue in Kissimmee, and that has a new right-of-way phase funded in fiscal year 2027. Then there's the project on Buenaventura Boulevard from Simpson Road to Osceola Parkway, and that's now funded for construction in fiscal year 2025. Then we have a couple of projects in Seminole County. There's a project on North Street from Raymond Avenue to Ronald Reagan Boulevard, and the segment from Raymond Avenue to Palm Springs Drive is now funded for construction in fiscal year 2025. The remainder of the project from Palm Springs to Ronald Reagan Boulevard is still unfunded. And then there's a Complete Streets project on Winter Park Drive from Redbug Lake Road to State Road 434 in Castleberry, and that has a new design phase funded in fiscal year 2026. Then we have the TSMO, the Transportation System Management and Operations projects. And on last year's prioritized project list, these projects were mainly a set of ITS, Intelligent Transportation System Technology projects on local roadway corridors. And I didn't see any of those projects that had new phases or had funding programmed in the new five-year work program. But this year I reorganized the TIP a little bit, and what had been the TSMO section of the TIP, I changed the name to Traffic Operations and Safety. And so I kept the TSMO projects in that section, and then the projects that are specifically identified as safety projects, I moved over from the highway section to Traffic Ops and Safety to give the safety projects a little bit more emphasis. And there were three new safety projects that were funded for construction in fiscal year 2023 with the ARPA funds that were included in the TIP amendments that were approved last year. And these are all in Orange County. These include the safety improvements on State Road 436 from north of Old Cheney Highway to south of University Boulevard. Then there's the improvements on Conway Road from Devonshire Lane to Lake Underhill Road. And then there's the project on Washington Street from US 441 to I-4. Then a project that was moved from the highway section to the Traffic Ops and Safety section is in Osceola County. That's a safety project on US 192 from Florida Avenue to Michigan Avenue in St. Cloud. And then there's a new safety project in Seminole County on State Road 434 from Range Line Road to US 1792 in Longwood, and that's funded for construction in fiscal year 2025. Then we have the regional trail and school mobility projects, And on this slide, I've listed those projects in the list from last year that have phases funded in the TIP. These include the Hickory Tree Elementary School Sidewalks project in Osceola County, which is funded for design in fiscal year 2025. And then there are 2 regional trail projects in Orange County that are both funded for construction. These include the Little Econ Trail Phase 3 and the Shingle Creek Kirkman Trail. Then finally, we have the transit projects, and these are mostly projects that are being implemented by Links. Some of these are just kind of ongoing from year to year. The capital expenses in transit asset management includes purchasing new vehicles and putting in passenger amenities and so on. And of course, again, that's an ongoing process. Then we have the Sunrail Phase 3, which would run from the Sunrail main line over to Orlando International Airport. And then Links has both their southern and northern operations bases on the list. And then there's the parking expansion at the Meadowwoods, Tupperware, and Poinciana Sunrail stations. Links has their service enhancements phases 1 to 3, which would be the improving and expanding their route system throughout the region. And then Links also has their transit facility implementation phases 1 and 2, which includes the improvements to Links Central Station and other transit centers throughout the area. So that's an overview of last year's prioritized project list and how some of the projects have been funded in the new TIP. I wanted to mention that, of course, this area has a lot of toll road facilities, and I didn't include the toll road projects in the presentation today just in the interest of time, and since those are not included in our prioritized project list, so Metroplan is not really involved in prioritizing those projects. But obviously, toll road projects are very important, and we include both the Turnpike and CFX projects in the TIP. And then we will, as Mary Ann mentioned earlier, we'll be having our virtual TIP public meeting. That'll be Monday, June 20th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. That will be on Zoom, and there'll be more information coming up on that on our website. So again, this will be coming back as an action item at your June meeting. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
So in June, will you present this again as an action item? Present details on it again?
This, well, I won't go through this presentation again, but yes, this will be presented as an action item.
Okay, here we go. Questions? I don't use this where you can ask questions.
Now we're all
Let me put them up. Ms. Delhan always comes through. Director, that's what's going on.
Thank you. This is really not a question. We have discussed, and some people have been saying here that I've been here forever, but we have discussed for multiple years about the progress of autonomous buses for the limo system downtown. And I have requested on at least 2 prior occasions to have Links come in here and explain to us what they're going to be doing with autonomous buses. Limo is still definitely not autonomous, and we've had no presentation from Links. As all of these buses and everything else that we're driving around are soon going to be obsolete, I'd like for them to explain to us how they're going to get from today to the future, which the future really is today, and no one's ever explained that. So what does it take to get them in here so they can explain to us how they're going to move us into the future here in Central Florida?
There's a process as far as getting presentations. There's a process for getting presentations on the agenda. It's not an overnight process necessarily, so that may be a little, I don't know. That's one of the things that's already out there.
Thank you.
So for this presentation, direction to Mr. Cass.
Good morning. Just to address that, yes, we have talked to Links. They are in progress. They just haven't made much more progress to come in and present. As soon as we're still working with Links on that. As soon as we have something that is presentable, ready, we will bring it back in front of all the committees.
That is the essence of the problem.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything. Okay? We're going to be left in the dark ages. Thank you.
I'm going to continue around the room in my view. Okay?
A couple of What is the timeline again for the ultimate, Beyond Ultimate project? And then when you were talking about the Sand Lake interchange, what exactly is that going to be looking like? Because I understand for the 535, that whole area in front of the Disney entrance was taken over. So how does the Sand Lake one look like? And it is going to have land acquisition as well involved in that? And then added onto the off-system widening for Old Lake Wilson, similar to what's being proposed for, I believe, 434 up in like Castleberry, Altamont area. It is about a 45-minute miles per hour road, and I know they're thinking of adding bike lanes as well, but it won't have any protected bike lanes. It's just going to be, just the little white line. So I just wanted to propose something in regards to safety in that aspect for the Old Lake Wilson to St. Clair widening area, just because it's a road that it is getting a lot of traffic, and at night there's not a lot of lights, so it's just like a safety measurement for that project.
Okay, so you were asking about the I-4 Sand Lake Road
Yeah, like
interchange?
what?
I believe that's going to be a divergent diamond interchange.
Okay.
I guess there's no one from DOT here today that can confirm that, but that's
Okay.
my
And
understanding.
for the Beyond the Ultimate I-4 with the tube and all that, what is the timeline?
You're talking about the ones that are the interim projects? Are you talking about the express lane? You said
Yeah,
the
from
tube?
from 528 from Kirkman to exit 68.
Yeah, well, they're scheduled to get underway this fiscal year. I don't have the exact timeline, but they'll be getting underway soon. So it would, be within the next, as far as the start of construction, it would be within the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, my question. Yes, good morning. My question relates to the OIA project on the transit plan. Do we have any cost estimates on that and the feasibility of it getting it done within the next 5 years?
As far as specific cost estimates, I don't have that in front of me. If you're talking about Sunrail Phase 3, but, it's, as far as whether it would be done within the next 5 years, oh. You're from DOT, okay. I'll let you, if you have anything to add on that.
What was the question? I missed the question.
You can
The
turn your
question-
microphone on,
The
please.
question was the OIA project on the transit plan that's scheduled for the next 5 years. I wanted to know, is there a cost estimate allocated to that and the true feasibility of it having it done?
He's talking about Sunrail Phase 3 over to the airport.
As far as Sunrail is concerned, I don't have that answer with me right now, but I can get it to you before the end of this meeting, so I'll check on that, get that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the Osceola projects you were talking about, the Dakin to Donegan Street and Simpson to Osceola Parkway. Can you elaborate a little bit more for me on that? Because I'm kind of new, so I don't really understand. I know that we're doing construction on 192 at like John Young Parkway and Hoagland, and I feel like the communication to the drivers or the motorists is kind of bad because they don't tell when the construction is happening, and sometimes they take away the whole right turn or the left turn for the construction projects. So I guess my question would be, how do I find out, or who do I talk to about getting more messaging from that? Because it causes traffic to be backed up for maybe a mile, half a mile, And I feel like a little bit of communication will help the drivers, especially in the morning on your way to work.
Probably it depends on who the responsible agency is. I can get that information for you.
Yes, sir.
But again, those are complete streets projects, so those are generally non-capacity. I mean, they might require retention ponds or something, but it's usually a combination of putting in sidewalks, bike lanes, intersection improvements and so on, just to improve safety and traffic flow. But, yeah, I can let you know who the responsible agencies are. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, given that this is just a presentation and not an action item, and given that this is also to be, I guess it's a public meeting in June, so there's not going to be any sunshine law violations if we all jump in on that same meeting and discuss the same things because it's a public meeting, it's been advertised, and we're all good to go with that. Just to be clear. Thank you.
Okay. If there are any other questions that we didn't get to address, did I miss you?
Yeah.
Did I miss you in the room?
I took up late, but.
Yeah, no problem.
Taking up
We have a format to where if you got an additional question, they will get it. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Get all official here. All right, Keith did part of my presentation by introducing the prioritized project list. And he hit it on the head, talking about this as an annual and recurring process, and referring to the PPL as a bridge. And it really is just that. We take this up every year as we update our TIP. We look at what's next. So, the TIP obviously looks at the next 5 years, but what about, projects that only have a certain phase funded in the TIP? What about projects that haven't even been funded at all? That's the prioritized project list. And that gets us from our long-range plan, our MTP, to our shorter-term plan, our funding plan, which is the TIP. Again, you see the second bullet there, the focus is on the first 10 years, and that's a big shift from some of our past priority lists where we almost included all of our projects from our 2040 plan, so it was a really long list. And sometimes when everything's a priority, you have to ask yourself, what is a priority? And I think, the focus on the first 10 years, plan periods 1 and 2 of our adopted plan really allow us to kind of bridge that gap, focus on what needs to be done in the near term. And that is the intent of the prioritized project list, with a focus on federally and state funded projects. So again, a little bit about approach. First and foremost, planning consistency. Our short-term documents need to be consistent with our long-term documents. Our federal and state regulators, hold us to that, and it's by good practice. We should be identifying needs and issues well in advance to funding them. Of course, there's always situations and developments that warrant itself, and that's why we have decision-making processes here. But in the long term, this list, this bridge, gets us to implementing our plan. In preparing the priority list, we use and follow the direction we've already received from our board, resolution, policy, feedback that we received along the way. And a lot of our methods and process is based on that direction. Goals and objectives that were established and adopted as part of our 2045 plan became criteria and indicators that we monitor. And we talked about a little bit last month as tracking the trends. But here we're using as criteria. So we said certain things were important, and we're putting that to criteria, quantitatively analyzing that, and recommending projects that are high quality and solve for the issues that we said are important to us. A couple more considerations. Funding eligibility, we talk a lot about that and what we do. Not all funds are created equal. Some have to be spent in certain areas, on certain types of projects, on certain networks. We're considering that as we're preparing these lists. So some of the sleuthing on what's eligible, what's fair game, that's what we're doing as staff as we're preparing these lists. So as you look at the priority lists, the list that they may are, or a sub-list that they may be on, that's because we're following the board funding policy and the eligibility based on those federal or state funds. I mentioned cost feasibility is important. That's first and foremost, as we have to have those projects affordable in the long term, and then we can fund them in the near term. I mentioned, and then the last two, funding availability and project readiness. As we're programming, as we're preparing and submitting projects into the work program, we have a certain amount of funds, finite funds, infinite needs in most cases. And then we look at our board's policy, and you might look at Complete Streets or the TISMO federal category. That's about $8 to $10 million a year. How do we fund that? How do we prime the pump? Some engineering phase, some, construction, and it's about balancing that. So as you look at the priority list, that's what you see is us making recommendations to FDOT to enter projects into the work program based on our understanding of local agency needs and priming the pump, kind of pun intended there. So our prioritized project list is, again, based on board policy and funding eligibility, and because of that, we have a few lists. But that helps us could be looked at as kind of a portfolio of projects, things that we said were important. This is how we're getting there with targeted investment. So I'm going to go over each of these categories. This is a figure adopted as part of our 2045 plan. And again, as we're implementing that, it makes sense to use it here in our priority list development. So over the next couple minutes, I'm just going to go through each of the lists, talk about some of the key priorities, some projects that we're recommending for funding, and then we also have a couple programs that are still under development, still need a little work, still need a little polish, and I'll talk about what we're going to be doing over the next few months to prepare for next year. But as we look at the interstate highway system or our strategic intermodal system, this is kind of I-4 for most cases as it relates to Central Florida. We have our ultimate configuration, county line to county line, both the continuation of what's already out there as beyond the I-4 Ultimate project, but also stretches north and east, or east and west, depending how you look at it. As Keith mentioned, truck parking is still a critical issue, statewide issue, I-4 corridor issue. Some funding is identified in the work program to fund one site, but our truck parking needs are much greater than that. So that's going to continue to be a high priority for us, and it's actually also a National Highway Freight Program priority, so it's been elevated to that level and brings in the possibility of discretionary funds, which certainly helps along the way. You're also going to see State Road 60 on this list. That is a strategic intermodal system corridor, also on the state highway system, but it is included in FDOT's cost feasible plan, so we're going to include it here. Critical corridor for South Osceola County going into Polk County, kind of Yeehaw Junction area for those who have probably not traveled State Road 60 before. Going to state roads, as you'll see, these are key priorities that we're coordinating in cooperation with DOT to get these projects funded. But you'll see projects, state highway system projects really across the region. These are just some of those top priorities that you'll see, but really everywhere from, East Orange County to areas in Kissimmee, Longwood, and areas everywhere in between. And those are the projects that we're recommending to FDOT to fund, and that's based on their discretion there. The Off-System Construction Assistance Program is another one of those programs that we established as part of the 2045 plan that gave aid possibility to our local government partners to fund some of those off-system projects that traditionally would be locally funded. This is that category of projects. These are currently unranked priorities because a major criteria or a factor for this particular program is the local agency has to fund all the preliminary phases. So this is construction assistance, and it's, we mean that. So we're funding only that phase. So as we look to local governments into their capital improvement programs, as we're looking to them, we're ensuring that they're following federal standards for design for right-of-way in the event that they have to do an acquisition, because we are using those funds for construction. We need to be sure we're playing by the rules, and we're having those discussions with our local partners along the way. But a new program, nothing funded yet. Stay tuned as our local partners advance those preliminary phases, but we look forward to spending those funds off system for these local priority projects. When we get into our TMA or our federally funded list, that's the next set of lists. So these are funds that we receive because we're an urbanized area. These are federal funds, totally at the discretion of the MPO board. So Metro Plan Orlando staff is basically prescribing what goes next into the FDOT work program. And as you can see here, we follow a priority process. We finish what we start, and that's always a good practice, and then we bring new projects, new phases into the work program. So you can see some projects here, both complete streets, but also with some safety focus across the region. A couple of these projects, based on some technical advisory committee standards, will require a local funding contribution because they do exceed the funding maximum. We have a $4 million funding cap for construction projects, for complete streets projects. That helps meter the program, doesn't create too many financial bottleneck projects. So with that, we communicate that, and local governments typically come in and provide the necessary match contribution. That's not an issue. We communicate that well in advance. One of the new programs, safety emphasis projects, critical importance, and because of that, we didn't want to rush to a call for projects. We just want to throw a list together. We want to use our vulnerable user working group. We want to tap into our technical advisory committee to identify those projects. The funds start flowing in 26, so we have time to take a step back, pick the right projects, vet them, and advance them for the next TIP. So the next time Keith comes up here, or the next time staff presents the Transportation Improvement Program, you'll be hearing about these projects entering into the work program. But stay tuned, as documented in the draft PPL, we're going to be working with TAC and the Vulnerable Users Group really over the next 4 to 6 months to kind of stand it up, develop an evaluation method, develop a kind of a call for projects, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll kind of go through the traditional advisory committee process. But that one, more to come on that one. Stay tuned. As it relates to our traditional TISMO, urban area funded projects, these are top priorities for what I call corridors and intersections. And then we go to our next two categories, which are kind of our new categories. Again, still need a little refinement. We have an ITS area-wide project, which allows our local agencies to buy multiple cabinets, buy CCTV cameras for 15 intersections, things that hard to measure, apples and oranges, because you're buying stainless steel boxes and hardware and software in some cases. But those are still critical needs. We saw that identified in the 2045 plan. So we identified $1 million a year for that. So the technical the systems management and operations advisory committee will be getting together over kind of that same next 4 to 6 months, standing up that protocol, and we'll be using that for our next priority list development. So we'll do a call for projects and vet those out over the next year. So next time we come up here, we'll have a set of priorities for this, as well as ACE's demonstration. Same thing, we're going to get the group together. They've already started talking through some of the kind of what I call framework issues, but they're going to be coming back together to talk more about how we want to evaluate projects. So we want to make sure we get ahead of that before we start, agree conceptually to, prioritization before we have projects to prioritize and things get, personal, parochial in some cases. So as we jump into more TMA funded or more federally funded projects, these are our regional trails, our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects. As you can see, construction and preliminary engineering for Shingle Creek Phase 4 is there, as well as bringing in some other projects in Orlando, as well as in Longwood on the E.E. Williamson road path there. Another category, that long-standing category that we've funded in the 2045 plan is what we call our school mobility program. It supplements FDOT's Safe Routes to School process. We're funding some of these, but again, these are priority lists that our school partners are able to submit projects to, and then we work with our lab partners to implement the project. So we're reaching out to those agencies to, again, prime that pump, get those projects funded with our funds. Another new program, Critical Sidewalk Gaps. We've had a preliminary discussion with the Vulnerable Users Working Group. We've begun the process of bundling those thousands of gaps into implementable packages of projects, things that we could fund, procure, and build. So we've started that. We're actually going to be reaching out to our local partners, likely sometime next week, with those draft bundles so they can look at them, make sure they make sense logically, make sure that they're not building any segments within those bundles. So we'll get that, and then similar next year, we'll take up and we'll be recommending specific bundles from the 3-county area, obviously with a safety transit emphasis focus. And then transit projects, similar to Keith's presentation, Sunrail Phase 3 of the airport is a critical priority, as is Lynx's southern and northern operation bases, so they can provide efficient service now and into the future. We have our Sunrail parking lot expansions also as part identified in the 2045 plan, and of course, that service expansion enhancement to Lynx's existing fixed route services, always a key priority. With that, a little bit about process, kind of what's next for us. We're taking this preview or this draft through our advisory committees into our board in the next couple weeks. We presented last week to TAC, and we're asking for their feedback by the end of next week. With that, we'll be able to kind of do any iterations, changes that we need to do for that final push, that final presentation, which will be coming back to you for your recommendation, and the board will be taking action at their July 27th meeting. So with that, that's what's next, but I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Sorry. I did have a question on sidewalks and the bike lanes, and it comes back to multiple comments we've had from many members regarding the safety. And, you know, we can pour a lot of concrete and we can make a lot of roads and put down more toll lanes for people that are going to get confused and get tickets for being in the wrong lane. It happens. But we have many roads that don't have adequate or any sidewalks at all, so people can't travel or walk safely that can't afford a car or can't afford links and whatnot, so that they can get to work. I travel Wymore Road. I mean, I live in Altamont, so I travel through Maitland, through Orange County. So Wymore Road, in through Eatonville, so down Kennedy Boulevard, which then turns into All-American, which then dumps off at OBT. Multiple sections of All-American have no sidewalks on either side. So people are having to either try to walk on the street, and if it's raining and wet, they're getting soaked. There's no sidewalks, there's no bike lanes at all. But Kennedy has a bike lane, but it's probably 24 inches wide, which means they can't safely travel down the road without possibly getting hit by a truck. Now, I understand that Kennedy, over the next couple years, will have a double lane and will be widened because they're already planning for it with markers and everything else. But anyone that currently needs to travel from that part of town to get to other parts of Orange County and whatnot have no safe way of doing it and getting from point A to point B safely.
And your question is, how do you get that on the list?
Yeah, it's how do we get those types of streets and listings that we have as we drive through our neighborhoods all over the counties we represent, that our citizens can get to places safely, not to mention continue to grow the ability to be healthier, ride bikes, walk, reduce emissions and all of those things that come with cars, and get them somewhere on some type of bulletin board or some type of thought process that, hey, we need to look at these different avenues and figure out how we're going to make them better so that we can, for one thing, reduce the traffic, get people thinner, healthier, lose weight, you know, all those things, but get there safely as well.
Yeah, I would say the process is what we have here, you know, the long-range planning process. You know, we did our last update, which was adopted in 2020. And the reason I go to that is, you know, this is where we kind of go wholesale update, where we say, what are the needs, what are the issues, what do we need to solve now and into the future? You know, we use data as much as we can to, you know, help analyze that, but we're also, you know, eyes and ears, you know, are on the road. That's who we are, as kind of probes on the system. So we're always looking to hear that. You know, what are the issues? The Critical Sidewalk Gaps program was established because of the very need that you heard. Is, you know, we have our Complete Streets program, and that funds, you know, more expensive type projects. You know, you get a sidewalk, but it's also a bike lane and landscaping, but that adds up, you know, $5, $10, $20 million easily. So we saw that, but it was like, how do we solve for just the sidewalk gaps? And that's where we're like, all right, with the funding we have, with the eligibility requirements that we can operate within, we can set these funds aside and accomplish. To your point, like I said, we adopted our 2045 plan in December of 2020. We're just kicking off here, likely early next fiscal year, an active transportation master plan, which is going to focus on bike ped access, bike ped connectivity, safety, health across the board. So we're reopening up that process to make sure that we capture everything. I'm going to add one caveat to all that, because that's all sounded great, right? Is as it relates to the work that we do, it's based on a network hierarchy. And I think this is always the challenge. You know, it's like, who do you call when you have the issues? You can always call us and we'll be the ombudsman to kind of, you know, get you to the right place. But in most cases, the sidewalks that we're able to fund are on the federal aid system. So they're on roads that might be designated as collectors. So we may not be able to solve for what you may consider a neighborhood street gap, or where, you know, and that's roles and responsibilities. Metro Plan Orlando can come and help in at this level. You know, beyond that, if there's still a gap, a safety issue, that's where our funds are become ineligible to spend off network, where we look to our local partners to invest their funds there. And that's what we're trying to do, is see where we can come and help on the federal aid network, and then have our locals focus their investment, you know, kind of on those other pieces. But we have some processes in place, and that we're going to be kicking off this calendar year. So stay tuned, and this group will be a vital component of that update process. I can commit to that.
Oh, sorry. You keep referring to our local partners. Are those like Orange, Seminole, Osceola, Lake County? Who are the local partners?
When I use that term, I'm referring to local government agencies in Central Florida. You know, the 3 municipal county partners, Orange, Osceola, and Seminole, and the 22 municipalities that fall under them. So those are, when we talk about local partners, those are those who, you know, collect taxes, right, general fund and other sorts, and can fund projects where we're not able to fund.
And you deal primarily with the federal and state funding and projects?
Explicitly.
Okay, and the local partners deal with local roads and projects?
Yes. In short, before Nick kind of cuts me off here, we have a federal aid network. So some of those are county road, you know, because they might be a minor arterial. So there's a lot of nuance to that, but we have certain networks that define eligibility, and we go through, after the census process, we define what we call a functional classification network, and that has meaning because it's how we are able to spend funds eligibly. So as you get lower into that network, what we would consider a local road, yes, we are unable to spend on it, and that's where we would look directly to our local partners, whatever that may be, if it's an unincorporated area or if it's an incorporated area. It would be within their jurisdiction to fund that need, because it's outside of our ability.
How does that relate to transit projects?
Could you be more specifically? And the reason I say that is there's federal funds, there's large discretionary grants that make transit possible, New Start, Small Start, so that kind of these historic programs. We have our formula funds, we have which are eligible for some transit spending. But when you look to where a lot of transit is funded in premium levels across the United States, it's typically with the support of some local government mechanism.
It just seems that transit funds are harder to get. They're not included in our plan as much as we would like them to be included, so I'll just put that out there.
And we are spending it. When you look at budgetarily, and this is shocker to many people, we're spending almost, if you net out local funds, we're spending almost like 40 to 50% on transit. It just doesn't go as far. You know, I don't mean that in kind of a draw. It's, you're moving people, but the expense of it is real. So it's when you say, you know, we have a $27 billion plan and we're spending 12 of it on transit, and you're like, for what? To keep the lights on the existing system. It's, you know, and I think that's where what the counties are doing is saying the federal money will keep your system lean, right, and operational. And Lynx they have a challenge, you know, doing that every year. And that's where you're seeing the local initiatives to say, do we want more? Do we want, you know, more service, more frequent service, an expansion of service? And that's how it's paid for. I would say that's almost the model in most metropolitan areas.
Thank you. I hate to harp on this topic again, but in the prior presentation, the 22, 23, 26, 27 tip, the Sunrail to OIA connector was listed in that project there. Now, in looking at Alex's presentation, he has the same plan listed for 2045, and I saw it on the presentation before this under transit projects. I'm confused. Are we going to fund it within the next 5 years, or are we going to wait to go out and get it funded and do it completed? I'm confused.
Yeah, let me try to help ease the confusion about that particular project and maybe just all projects. So any project that has any fund, you know, so you know, we'll call it 4 phases to a project, right? So you have your preliminary engineering, you know, you have your right of way, and construct, we'll call it 3 for these purposes. If the preliminary engineering, make sure my camera's on, is in the work program, the TIP, and the other 2 phases are not funded, that project will remain on the priority list until, and then next year we fund right-of-way. And then construct, right-of-way is in the work program along with design, and then construction's on the priority list. So it's a way of not losing anything in the gaps, especially as the work program changes. And as we have amendments to the work program and things change, the priority list is our way of attempting to make sure nothing gets lost in the cracks in evolutions of change. The Sunrail project, phase 3, and I'm thankful I can do this. I'm gonna lean to Nick to answer that one. But the short answer, the reason it's listed on both documents is the example that I gave, is some fund, some phase might be in the work program, our TIP, but unfunded phases to get it 100% operational live are not funded yet. And I can't tell you the timeline on it, whether that will be in the next 5 years. That's where Nick comes in.
I asked this question for one basic reason. You got Universal, who's already dedicating 13 acres of land back in their epic universe back there for a train station. You got Disney doing the same thing, dedicating right away and a train station for a bright line to the airport going that way. Now, are you going to sit here or stand here in this case and tell me and the public that within the next 5 years, this project won't be done? What are you going to tell the big kahunas that this is not going to get done?
I guess right now, it's a partnership between
Right.
the state and Orange County and Brightline on the timing of what that's going through. That's largely privately funded, the Brightline and the Universal. Now, our project that we have within our plan that we've been identified for many years has been the connection of Sunrail to the airport. That is still in our plans for use of federal or state funds to do the preliminary engineering or the PD&E work that's going on right now. Parallel to that is also the work that Brightline is doing. Absent of what we're doing, because it's not requiring any federal funds, we're still examining that connection because that is our #1 priority for transit, especially premium transit. So that can continue on. Now, after that PD&E, if Brightline goes away, I don't know, we can still move forward with that connection of Sunrail connecting to the airport because we'll be looking into that next phase of design and then right-of-way and construction. So right now, it's in the work program as it's being worked on for that feasibility. Next, we'll determine, is it going to be a state or federal funded project that's going to be connecting to the airport, or is it going to be a privately funded project? That we don't know yet. That we'll still be working with the state and private entities and the county as we all consolidate and develop our plans to be consistent. So that's where we're at right now in the earlier planning stages. I can't tell you that it's going to be there in 5 years. I can tell you we're still working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to cover several issues, but I really want to go back to Jeff and his request about these sidewalks. And the thing, Jeff, you need to remember now is you get credentials behind your name because you're on this committee. So what you can do, and I have done multiple times over the past 2 decades, is send an email not only here, but to whatever governmental jurisdiction controls that section of road to get your sidewalks put in. And what happens, that's the easiest way to get that on their list. And then once it's on the list, you do the same thing as it is here. There's a priority list to get these things done. I've had countless sidewalks and numerous other projects taken care of. And the amazing thing, it's almost dumbfounding. You tell them about some of these projects, they're unaware of the need there. And it's just bringing it to their attention. They'll start looking at it, and then they'll start the funding process and everything to get it done. So I highly recommend these sections that you see, because we're their eyes and ears, right? We just send in these messages to them. They'll act on them. So anyway, just food for thought. Totally. No, yeah, I've got 2 more, yeah. I just want to congratulate your work. Having been here for many, many, many years, monies that almost exclusively went for widening roads is now actually going for bicycle, pedestrian, Tismo, and the shift of our funds to taking care of people just walking on the streets has been amazing. And this is also going to help fill in all of these sidewalk gaps and everything else and make the Central Florida a much friendlier place to be. But back to your presentation, I see under links, there's nothing in there about monies for autonomous projects. It's got to be addressed eventually. And it doesn't even make the notes.
I hear you, and I'm not sure if, to be in all honesty, if the appropriate place is in the priority list until, the feasibility. I'm not saying it's not infeasible, but, the technical feasibility done by Links. They are going through a process right now, updating, one of their core products called the Transit Development Plan, looks at the next 10 years. That's something that, as we're coordinating with them, we can certainly share your, concern, and I'd like to think, I'm not going to assume, right? But I can certainly relay that message and see how it gets included in the process. But as it goes electric, as it goes autonomous, it's not just flipping a switch. There's a lot of logistics and planning that does go into that. But I don't mean to discount your vision there, because it is, the future. So just be nice to me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm going to piggyback off of Jeff and Tom here and talk a little bit about, in the past, when I started on this committee, it was really the bicycle committee. And it was focused on bicycles and peds. And while a lot of work has gone into the bicycle and projects, and appreciate everything that you folks are doing, we still are putting in bike lanes that don't get used, because there's a 4-foot bike lane with a white strip and nobody rides it, right? And so what happens is we look at stats and we go, how many bicyclists have been injured on this bike path? Well, none, because nobody's on it, nobody feels safe in that bike lane. So I don't know where this fits in these projects, but somewhere along the line, we got to rethink that whole bike lane thing, UCF just got, I live out by UCF, most of you know that, but we just got our bronze designation from the League of American Cyclists, and we just treaded water since 2017, because we got bronze then, we got bronze now, and we didn't move to silver. And one of the reasons is because of the outlying area, Alafayette Drive and these other areas. University doesn't even have bike facilities. University Boulevard is a 6-lane road out there. So I don't know where this fits, and I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling here, but I think we need to really take a hard look at how these bike lanes are put in going forward, because the state has their mandate on how they're put in, and so does everyone else. But it's not working, and we need to find a way to make it work so that people use those. And a perfect example is on the south side of McCulloch Road is now a 10-foot wide shared pathway, and it's great because it goes an entire mile and with no stops, and there's no bike lane on McCulloch, but people now use bikes on that trail, and they're being used. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out, and food for thought, I guess, and that's really it.
Quick response, I promise. That's complete streets. That's that paradigm shift of going in, saying it's not just cookie cutter. We're not just going to go plug it in because standard said so. And it's a big ship to turn, but I think it's turning. We have an example, project we're doing in St. Cloud right now, 10th Street corridor. The goal is improving bike access. So what would the first thing you would typically do? Put in a bike lane, right? That would be, common sense. But based on the context and the analysis and what the community wanted, it's a wide shared use path on one side and a connected continuous sidewalk on the other. And that provides, the bike access and safety with, driveway spacing and other intersection spacing. So I think I'd say everything's contextual, but I think that's where things are going, and that's why we're studying these things versus just taking them right to design, where you would basically just go in and basically just kind of plug in, kind of street mix, your way through a design project. So that's, the extra labor gets you to that better product. And I think, there's a stranded asset, there's a big, topic about stranded assets, putting infrastructure out there that's unused, and that's one of those topics. But some of it's standard-based, but I think the context and how the ship's turning will help, put in the right type of infrastructure that will actually be utilized.
Thank you, Chairman Como. The projects that you have on your priority list that are specific to Orange County, how will those priorities be affected if Orange County voters pass Mayor Deming's transportation sales tax this November? Do priorities get shifted around? Does it open up more opportunities for more priorities? What coordination will you be doing with Orange County as those additional funds come in if that tax gets approved?
I was like, I felt that. I felt it.
Let me get that one. Because that actually kind of addresses Mrs. Webster's question earlier about how we go through this and what happens when, local projects versus state road projects versus what we fund through federal funds. That's the coordination we do with our local partners and as well as DOT as we're trying to get these projects in this 5-year work program to manage it. Once we have it into the 5th year, as those projects get closer, project costs go up, some things come down, schedules start shifting. So that's the management that we do kind of internally and discussing all together. So with Orange County, we'll be meeting with them regularly with this, as we do with our local government partners that have a capital improvement program. We're not both going to fund the same projects. What we look for is, okay, this is a priority for federal funds, so we're going to use federal funds for it, which could clear up a lot of those local funds for the smaller sidewalk gaps that are off that federal aid system. So that's where we look at to partner. The state, the DOT has restrictions. Their state funds can only go on state roads. So we look at what state roads they're going to be funding. What federal funds can we put on that rest of the federal aid network to help support that, as well as the Turnpike and CFX, and then the locals too. So it's all a system, and it's all kind of a partnership that we look for as we not only adopt this tip, but then manage this tip to make sure that we're getting all the projects in and completed.
Thank you.
Two things real quick to say. One, I was wondering, there was a suggestion I wanted to make. When we do these presentations, I know we have the tip map online, but I was wondering if it was possible to also simultaneously include like a map while we're presented this, because we see a lot of just different streets, and it's hard to kind of visualize what streets we're looking at, especially all of us live in different areas in the Tri-County area of Metro Plan. So it's just kind of more to facilitate a more well-rounded understanding, not just for us, but if the public is there, and if they're not aware of that the tip map does exist. So just to have like a more better understanding of what exactly we're looking at, because we go through it so quickly that it's hard to visualize, like, oh my God, where is this road? So just that. And then also, Alex, I don't know if I heard you correctly, but did you say something about a Sunrail parking expansion at some point?
In our adopted plan, we do have identified need for parking expansion at some of our, I don't have them offhand, I think it's like Tupperware, Meadowwood, some of kind of the phase 2 sites. With everything that's occurring with Sunrail phase 3, Bright Line, we need to resolve some of those issues before we dive into, again, that stranded asset building a possible parking lot, the greatest stranded asset of the future. So that's kind of where it's in the long-range plan as, a cost affordable. But timing and kind of what's happening right now, kind of outside of our process, is something we're keeping a close eye on. But that's something that once the dust settles on some of those other topics in that area, we may or may not be kicking off some type of feasibility study that looks at the level of need and the feasibility with some site selection, possibly, some site feasibility. So, but there is a need. Some of those, and some of this is pre-pandemic as well, where a lot of these needs were there. But some of those sites, we're at least at the point at time of the adopted plan, we're experiencing near overcapacity for a park and ride station. And that's, concerning, especially as those are on the commuter rail front, those are the stations where you're kind of intended to bring people in from the fringe into the core. So it was about providing capacity in those areas. But we're keeping a close eye on the market, and we'll be kicking off that work as and when needed.
Okay, because I don't, I mean, we're moving kind of towards, like, in design and just how you require the density around the center area, so like, I was wondering how that plans out with plans that are happening there to maybe increase more housing density rather than just expecting people to drive in. So I just want to see the context, but I didn't, like what you said, you're
And that would be
ongoing.
explored, and
Yeah.
there's, example and a lot of case study about who's living in the apartments around Sunrail versus who's riding Sunrail, and it's, transit adjacent versus transit oriented is a kind of a topic of discussion.
Thank you.
Lucille Baldry.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Great presentation, Alex. I always love, I think I say this every year, the graphic that MetroPlan created that shows MTP, the bridge that PPL serves to the TIP. Fantastic. Anyways, so I actually had a question or comment on Mr. Mueller's comments. Thank you. I think we're all saying just about the same thing. I've seen in your PPL that you're advancing some road widenings. These are FDOT projects for the most part. And I think what Mr. Bobinger also shared is like, how are we accommodating these road widenings with accompanying safety improvements? And so that kind of also leads into my other question is like, how are you differentiating between complete street projects, bike ped projects, and safety projects when, for me, when I think about a road widening, all of those things need to come together. So I just want to know a little bit more about like how you are differentiating among those categories.
Yeah, and some of it's pretty specific in there about the project types, complete street, I know that's, everything's complete within, the eye of the beholder, right? But that one's typically where you need, more of a possible reconstruction where, you may or may not be moving center line, where you need to study it. It's not so straightforward. The sidewalk gaps program that, that we're identifying, it's pure and simple. We know we have a constrained we know we have a constrained facility. It just needs a sidewalk to solve for. So that's kind of where we're going in. Somewhat might be a piecemeal, kind of a temporary approach to maybe a larger expansion on some of those corridors. But it's a way about, I guess, immediately solving for, one of the greatest issues at hand, especially, because a lot of complete streets, it's, again, if you have to move the center line to accommodate, contiguous sidewalks on both sides of the road, it raises a $20 million, sidewalk gap question versus a $200,000 sidewalk question. So it's a way for us to accomplish what we said is important, which is solving, solving for access, providing safety. And that's where the bundles are one thing, but when we prioritize them next year and you start to see how bundles are prioritized with safety and access and kind of transit mindedness, you'll start to see that we're investing still towards kind of multimodal by kind of targeting our our pedestrian investment to focus on, supporting transit usage. And then the ped bike infrastructure projects, those are pretty much
Recreational.
trail.
Okay.
Shared, it could be trail, it could be shared use path, and that's pending the design too, and that's where we don't want to, it's a wide sidewalk, 6+ feet, comes at again, it's either 200,000 a mile, give or take, or, 2 million a mile. So there's, almost like an order of magnitude there. So that's where we're trying to differentiate the project type so we can implement them under the funding confines, like the funding availability that we have year to year.
Cool. I think my comment is mostly just as we think about these road widenings, they seem simple, right? I think you're saying that complete streets might be a more complex project. I would like us to think more critically about our road widening so that we're not just ending up with a 4-foot bike lane that's painted. That is one of the most dangerous things, and none of our elected officials or funding partners would put anyone they love on those. So anyways, just
we would agree.
thank you. I know you guys totally do.
Yeah, preach.
It's more just for
Nick
folks in
made
the
a great
room.
comment, though, and I just wanted to kind of bring this, and it's a topic that you're probably going to hear a lot about. It's called target speed. You've probably heard about design speed, and it's how they've kind of picked speed limits in years past, which may have led us to the circumstances of today and the issues that we're facing. But DOT has, confronted that issue, and they're exploring what they call design speed, or target speed. So it's like design the road so people actually drive that speed versus, how it was done before. But anyways, through the design process, that target speed methodology, which is kind of like a planning engineering process, will be overlaid into that. So, as they're trying to balance, to your point, putting in a a sidewalk, a shared use, a sidewalk and a bike lane versus, a wide shared use path, that's where they'll, without doing a planning study, they'll be able to come to terms with what will fit.
I
what's
hear
in
what you're saying,
context.
Alex. I'm just doing what Mr. Campbell did,
Yeah, great.
Mr. O'Hanlon to do, which is just keep
Say,
talking. I
no,
just
but,
gotta keep going.
but the reason I say this is a topic in a term that you're going to be learning a lot more about, and it's important because as the state will be widening the roads, and there's needs, there's congestion and reliability issues that we're when you look at the toolkit, we need to do that in those certain instances, not everywhere, but there's certain areas and instances where it's appropriate to widen. But where we are, we're going to make sure we're going to do our best and think a little a little more broadly about the users in mind. So that's the only reason I say that. Not to is you're going to hear a lot more about that term, and it's kind of new to us. So you're going to I'm sure it's new to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you stole my thunder, actually. Earlier, you seemed to suggest there was perhaps a $4 million cap that's codified regarding complete streets projects. Is that the case that we should be aware of?
Yes, for the per phase, and that's really the construction phase.
Okay,
So it's
yeah, because
$4
you
million
also
per phase,
mentioned
but
just
the
a
only-
second ago, like a $20 million right-of-way purchase. I'm thinking, well, that blows everything else out of the water, so.
Yeah, right-of-way and complete streets in our mind, if you're taking land beyond, corner clips and easements to accomplish shared use path within that nature, right-of-way is an ineligible phase for our complete streets program. And that's because of what it would do. We're talking once you slice and dice it, we're talking $10 million a year. You add a right-of-way phase or two, and that program is halted by one project for the next decade.
I just want to be clear on that. And secondly, and my last question regards actually the trails versus the shared use path. You had the slide regarding the recreational trails, and yet all three of the examples, like the Shingle Creek number 4, the Lake Underhill, they were all shown as shared use paths. Is that just basically it's a design? Is
Yeah,
it
we
like
don't have
10
a
feet
terminology.
or-
I don't think we have an organizational terminology where we call something a recreational trail. And the reason I say that is the pending the time of day, the trails have different users and could serve, it might be recreational on a weekend, obviously, but, Katy Way, people are using that for commute purposes, So again, it's a shared use path. It's a multimodal facility. It's paved. So we're not talking about, recreational trails for equestrian or other use, which is a different thing, a different line on the map. But these are paved shared use paths. And what we mean by shared use path is basically anything wider than a traditional 5-foot sidewalk.
And here's the significance of my comment. It's because when I was a park planner across Old County, those were important issues when you're talking about grant funding. So it's just something that, we, as a collection of organizations, right, we want to probably figure out what exactly we're talking about here. And I get it. I mean, I understand the use of the facilities, but, for those people that are impacted, or for those entities that are impacted like that, we need to say, this is in our master plan or whatever. We need to be clear about that, I guess. I don't know any specific examples, but then again, I do know it's important, so.
I hear you. And I think as the project evolves and a shared use path fills a gap, maybe it becomes part of a trail network. Because I see, at least in my mind, I see trails as more of like a network hierarchy, not necessarily like a build, like a design specification necessarily. So.
To develop a plan for mitigating the impact of emissions in Central Florida. The status update builds on the previous work with air quality. Ms. Dr. Hafu Yu of UCF will present the information. Dr. Yu, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So my name is Hafei Yu. I'm Assistant Professor in Environmental Engineering from UCF. So we have an ongoing project with the Metro Plan called Ozone Contingency Plan for the Tri-County region of Orange, Seminole, and Osceola County. The reason why we have this project is because of this air pollutant called ozone. We all know ozone, when ozone is up there in the ozone layer, it's good ozone. It protects us from harmful UV radiation. But when you have ozone near ground, that's bad ozone because you are breathing in the ozone and that's bad for your health. So, and the ground level ozone concentration is regulated under the Clean Air Act. It's one of the most important regulations in the United States. So they have the standard called the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, or you can call it NAAQS. The problem with that one is EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, set up the extensive network around throughout the entire U.S. to measure ozone concentrations. If ozone concentration violates this standard, then the entire states will go into a state implementation plan, which is mandated and is very expensive. So that's why we have this ozone contingency plan in place, just in case it happens. And this is the case in the Tri-County region. In the OSO region, what we see here is that, since 2015, the ozone concentration standard has been tightened. And if you look at the standard, the measured design value, which is the value calculated based on the definition, legal definition, it's quite close to the violation. So the whole idea of this project is to be prepared if this thing happens. Right now, everything's fine, but if it happens, we know what to do. So a quick thing about ozone is, I'll go very briefly on this, is basically the thing with ozone is not directly emitted. Only a teeny portion is emitted. Rather, it's formed through photochemical reactions, chemistry reactions, and using two chemicals, NOx, nitrogen oxide, and VOCs. So control ozone, we need to control NOx and VOCs. We cannot control ozone emission because there's not much. So that's the idea of this project. So in this project, what we want to do is basically we want to find what is the most important source of NOx and VOCs in this region. And we want to know how they are distributed spatially and temporally. Once we know that, we can design policy actions, different policy options to be able to control their emissions. So in this project, we have 3 tasks. So the first task, we want to estimate NOx and VOC from vehicle sources, transportation networks. And second task, we want to understand the NOx and VOC emissions from all other sources in the region. Just quick number, there are around 10,000, more than 10,000, about 13,000 emission source categories for NOx and VOC in this region. So final task is, once we know this information, we want to know that what kind of policy option we can use, what's the policy option we can do, and how they impact emissions, the NOx and VOC emissions, so we can know how to control ozone. So at this moment, the task 1 is done, so on vehicle emission, which I'm going to briefly present the results. We're applying a standard regulatory model called MOVES here. So the second task is more than half is done. So for the second task, we need to run weather forecasting models to give us meteorological data for the field, for this region. The reason is because many emission is actually depends on meteorological conditions, such as emission from vegetation. And we are working on the next modeling task, which is using the state-of-the-art emission model called SMOKE to estimate emission from all other sources other than vehicle sources. So task 1 is still for the next planning stage. We haven't started yet. So, and for the task 1, as you were saying, it's for focused on vehicle emissions, it's tightly related to transportations. And what we did is here that we not only applied the model to estimate emission for the 3 Tri-County region, we also include the Lake counties because we are in the same airshed, which basically their air pollution emission impact us strongly. And what we did here, we performed a detailed estimation. Basically, we include many different processes because you not only have vehicle running exhaust emission from tailpipe, you also have like refilling emissions, like start emissions, bunch of different emission processes. We performed a detailed estimation about 36,000 roadway segments in the entire region. So if we look at the NOx emission, this figure basically shows the annual NOx emissions in metric tons or tonnes for the 4-county region. So we performed the estimation for 2011 and 2017. The reason we choose this 2 is because this is the year we have data available. So US EPA provides detailed data, but they are kind of slow in moving forward. So 2017 is the latest we have. 2011 just for comparison. So between 2011, 2017, what we see here is that in this region, we see a significant decline of emissions of NOx. And this happens in all of the 4 counties. And if we look at where the emission come from, for vehicles, the most important NOx source is running exhaust, it's from tailpipe. You do have a teeny portion of start, which is when you crank the vehicle start, the engine is still cold, and that time you have more emissions. You have a teeny fraction of start emissions. Now, if we look at VOCs, volatile organic compounds, it's more complicated. So we still see between 2011, 2017, we see declining emissions. And if you look at the composition, running exhaust is a big chunk, but you also have the start emission become more important, and we also have other emission sources. Just quick technical term is called Evap. So this is in every car, you have Evap system to control gasoline vapors, because you don't want them to emit uncontrolled. You might cause explosion. So this system is regulate the Evap, but you cannot completely seal it, because you have to have some air in there. So that gives you a little bit of emissions. Also refilling, which is, when you're refilling at the gas stations, you also have some emissions. These emission sources start to show up for volatile organic compounds. And if we compare our results to the National Emission Inventory, which is compiled inventory by US EPA, it's an authoritative source of emissions. We see that basically our estimation is quite similar, which expected. But one of the things is in 2017, if you look at Osceola, we see our estimate is much smaller. And we did look deeper, and it turns out that there is an error in US EPA's inventory. So the vehicle traveled, mileage traveled through into the inventory is actually, it appears there is an error there. That's why, it's supposed to decline, but you see a jump in the EPA's data source. Same thing for VOC emissions. You still see, still seeing also in 2017 is a weird jump in the EPA's inventory. So now, if we, as mentioned previously, we did a detailed estimation for like dozens of thousand roadway links. We did the estimation for every single hour within 2 years for the estimation. Now, this basically quickly show you what it looks like in Seminole County. So you can clearly see that the darker color means more emissions per mile. You can clearly see that. So you can, the biggest roads, major roads, like the 417, I-4, they pop up. It's more darker because they have more vehicles. You also see that between 2011 and 2017, the color basically goes to blue a little bit. Basically means less emissions. Now this is for Orange County. You can see the same thing here. I'm going to quickly jump over this. Now this is for Osceola County, and this is for Lake County, same thing. And we also did the animation, which is give you idea of hourly emissions. So again, we did this for every single hour of every single roadway segment within 2 years. So you can see that at midnight you do not have much emission, but when you're approaching rush hour, you see this red popping up, especially morning and afternoon rush hours. This is, of course, Seminole County, and we did the same thing for Orange County. It's the same idea. I'm going to quickly jump over this. We did the same thing for Osceola. Same observation, rush hour higher emissions, and we did that for Lake County, the same conclusion. So that's basically our results for vehicular emissions. We are working on for other emission sources. As mentioned, we're already done with weather modeling. And the next step is we're going to apply it for the weather data, meteorological data, and to estimate emissions for all other sources. Once we're done with that, we're going to have a detailed discussion with Nick and Alex, and we're going to explore different policy options. What can we do as potential policy options if, let's say, in the future somehow we violate the ozone standard? What can we do so we can be prepared for that? With that, I'll be taking any questions.
Okay. Ms. El Badri, you first.
I like that Nick just like crept up here. This question is for Dr. Yu. So I actually had a question. So statewide, or you're saying that our 3-county region is close to violating the EPA
Yes.
threshold. Who else in the state is doing that as well? Or close to that as well?
Actually, Tampa to Miami. So basically, the entire Florida, you do have the several major. I cannot give you the list off my head, but
Major
there's-
metro-
yes,
most of the
major
major
metropolitan
metropolitans.
regions is close. One of the reasons is because the ozone standard is being tightened and it's really close. It's very low.
Got it. And then this is actually great. So is there any correlation for like, it seems like every time the standard is, tightened, we start decreasing. Why is there, can you explain this trend?
Sure, yeah. So as mentioned, ozone it's tricky thing. It's hardest pollution to regulate because it's from chemistry. So we mentioned the chemistry, you have sunlight and emissions. And sometimes, maybe in a year, the sun is extra bright and everybody want to drive to the beach, and that's a problem because you have sunlight, emissions, boom, you have chemistry, you have ozone. It's
You blaming my beach
complicated.
trip? Is that what you're doing?
Huh?
I'm just kidding. Never mind. Keep going, sir.
Yeah, that's what I do. But anyhow, so the whole idea is because it's not purely on emission. It also depends on weather. Maybe in that year, I don't know yet, but my guess is the weather is maybe less sunlight. We don't know, but it's a tricky thing. I hope that answered the question. No problem.
Mr. Spilo.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Chairman. Actually, that was mainly my question, if we're the only ones or if it's also statewide. And then you also went into my next question, which was weather-related. So my question answered, but I would like to just say how excited I am that you guys are doing this work. I'm one of UCF's first legacy alumni. My dad was in the first graduating class at FTU. So this makes me very proud to be a UCF alumni with knowing that you guys are doing this work. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bobinger.
Thank you for the presentation. It's great information, as I ran a company for years that had to deal with emissions and regulating commercial vehicles and trucks and changing their exhaust system to help regulate and reduce this. The big problem that I guess I'm seeing is you see these jumps as in your charts where the emissions go down, then they go up and go down, and I'm guessing it has to do with the EPA and their regulations, and then the feedback and the lashback that they get from constituents and people in the country, where vehicles double in price because of emission regulations and having to put on different exhaust, and then you start to see the same thing with fuel costs and trucks and transportation and freight, all those costs going through the roof because all these companies are trying to regulate and make their vehicles a more emission-safe unit. I mean, this will come back to what Tom says is, when we start getting more vehicles that are electric and that are autonomous, that are charging and they're going out there and they're spending less fossil fuels and fuel, then this will hopefully all reduce, hopefully. But,
Yeah.
It's hard to say, as America is quite stubborn in things, and, change is gonna happen one way or another, but it's just at what cost? And, this is all good information and I'd probably say it's not just Florida, it's pretty much any large metropolis that has these problems that are hitting these edges of where things need to get knocked back down and get clean again, so, thank you.
Okay, we're going to have to keep them tight because we're really running close. Mr. Peters, let's go with you next.
I think that was part of the question that I had. If your study included, the use of electric vehicles versus the vehicles that use fuel, what percentage difference is there for one vehicle?
For one vehicle, it depends on what pollutant we're looking at. For one vehicle, generally it's at the gram level per mile. It's a teeny fraction. It becomes a problem if we have several million vehicles, such as in Orange County. So another thing with the electric vehicle is that technically speaking, because you need to charge the EVs, but when you charge, the electricity has to be generated from somewhere, right? So that source also contributes to emission. Sometimes, if you enhance one emission from one place, reduce emission from another place, but overall, how do you balance that? It remains, it remains basically more work needs to be done in the area.
Well, unless in the future we'll have less emissions anyway, with the advent of more electric vehicles that we're using, so. best for the environment, I would imagine.
Generally, yes.
Ms. Pizzo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, with the exception of this chart, a lot of your data, your cutoff was 2017. So perhaps naive of me, why are we still having an issue with all the improvements in theory of our cars? What is your speculation on that? And where do you think in that 5-year gap between 2017 and 2022, exclusive of the COVID where nobody was driving,
Yes.
do you anticipate any continued improvement?
To be honest, it's hard to say, but just one thing that when you mentioned COVID, if you look at 2020, you see the dip. That's because less driving, because basically lockdown, no much driving, you do see the dip. So in regard to to further beyond the 20, like let's see this year, it's tricky. But if you look at it from 2015 to 2019, we are on the decline, uptick level. But like I mentioned, though, the ozone is tricky because you do require meteorology conditions, you do require sunlight. So, maybe in one year you have fluctuation in sunlight radiation, then it jumps down. It's just tricky to say. That's why it's so hard to control. It's not direct emissions. I hope I can answer a question.
Yes, thank you. It was a good presentation.
Okay. Mr. O'Hanlon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having been at this probably for longer than anyone else here in the room, our reductions have been for a long period of time. And the biggest chunk of them are federal regulations reducing NOx emissions from cars. The next major dive came from when they made two-cycle engines illegal for things like wave riders and lawn mowers and everything else. That made a huge difference. The next big dive is going to be all of your yard equipment can no longer be two-cycle. That makes a huge difference. And then the last huge difference is going to be when everybody goes electric, this almost goes away. So we've had, and then you go back to, I think it's 2012 there, and this is a big problem here. We had the wildfires, and then the fires are near these sensors, and then it says we're doing terrible. So, none of that was mentioned in the background, but that's really what's going behind the scenes on all of these lines here. And in general, the numbers would always be going up here because everyone wants to move here and the density of people living here goes up, which means more cars per given area. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Coleman?
Thanks.
Sorry, thank you very much. I want to go back to the Osceola error. Can you explain that a little bit to me? Because what kind of errors did you guys find?
Oh, you mean
From the NEI?
I see. So what happened is in Osceola in 2017, so in part, when we do this modeling, we need a number of total vehicle mileage traveled in the entire county. So when we see this, we saw that something is just so interesting. So we dig deeper, we look at the raw data, used in the NEI. And it appears that total vehicle mileage traveled is more than twice it's supposed to be. Because we have data from different sources. We have data from DOT, we have data from Streetlight, which is an advanced big data system, transportation planning system, used by MetroPlan, and it doesn't add up. So DOT's number and Streetlight's number are really close, but that number goes to NEI, is more than twice as high. It doesn't make sense. So we suspect there are errors there too.
Been modeling traffic here for about 20 years. Osceola County has always been tricky because you get a lot of residual traffic coming out of the Disney as an attraction. So it's been always difficult to get their forecast right, especially in terms of VMT and the number of people that live there versus vehicles. So I was not surprised when I saw that number from EPA, which is why I was happy we're using our updated numbers through our better data source.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Mott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great presentation. It was very interesting as well. Science is not my strong suit for sure, so it was interesting to hear some of the scientific aspects of it. I had several questions. A couple have been addressed already, so I'll just leave with my final question, which is, what can we do as residents to contribute to improving this situation? Is there anything we can do?
Well, yes, I would say, for example, drive less.
Drive less?
Yes, that's probably the biggest, more energy conservative. That's probably the biggest thing. And there are many other small things. For example, one thing that many people find is surprising, just one example would be inflate the tire to the right pressure.
What was that?
Inflate the vehicle tire to the right pressure.
Inflate the vehicle tire
Yeah,
pressure?
because that actually contributes to fuel economy and contribute to less emissions. So,
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank
no
you.
problem. Thanks.
Dr. Yu, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We have one more presentation. We have about 15 minutes left, and this presentation is scheduled for about 12 minutes.
So no questions, that's what you're telling us.
No, we do have the format for the questions, so, but let's see how this goes. We have a presentation on the Pedsafe 2 program in the region, which uses technology to improve pedestrian safety. Mr. Nick Spatola of Fall Davis Consulting will present the information. Mr. Spatola.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for allowing us to present today. We're here to talk about the Pedsafe 2 project. This project falls underneath FDOT's larger Pedsafe program. As mentioned, it's the second phase. The initial phase was a deployment out in the UCF area, and this falls under a federal grant that FDOT was awarded, and so we're continuing our work. So one of the things we wanted to present to you today is how to cross an intersection. I'm sure everyone is familiar with that, right? You know how to cross an intersection? Great. No problem, easy to do. Push the button. You wait. You wait some more. You start to doubt yourself. Did I push the right button? The most important question is, does that button actually do anything? Right? You think, okay, I pressed the wrong one. I'll push the other one just to make sure I've got everything covered. You keep waiting, and you keep waiting. Our thought is, how can we change this? And what if it could be different? So what if the pedestrian phase started automatically for you, so you didn't have to push the button? Button would still be there in case you wanted to push it, but we could do it without you having to interact at all. What if there was a light that indicated which crossing you were going from and to, so you knew you hit the right button and where you were going to cross? What if you knew about how long it would take before you got that walk signal? What if we could make that a little bit shorter? Would this keep you from crossing the street against the signal and walking out into oncoming traffic? And that is really our overall objective. So now we present a different scenario, one where we've implemented some Pedsafe technologies. First thing that happens, you walk up, you hit the button. You see this indication that says watch with a ring around it. The other thing that happens is a blue indicator light comes on the two pedestrian signals along the path that you want to cross. And that lets you know you hit the right button and you know where you're going now. Signal goes yellow, a countdown timer begins. So now you know about how long before you're going to get to cross. Signal goes red, that countdown timer continues, and then the walk indication comes on and you can cross the street. This project is being done in conjunction with other improvements along Orange Blossom Trail. The overall objectives of that project, which runs from Holden up to I-4, is to reduce vehicle speed, concentrate pedestrian crossing locations, install some additional mid-block crossings, and then corridor-wide safety improvements, relocating bus stops, reducing curb radiuses to try and slow down turning vehicles. All of these improvements are being made within that corridor. Here is just kind of a summary of all the different things that are being installed there, and you can see it's pretty extensive. You're looking at the goal of a 10-mile-an-hour speed reduction, installing landscaping, median fencing, some additional crossing locations, some upgraded lighting, so quite a few things being done to improve pedestrian safety within this corridor. So why are these projects separated? Well, that allows us to do a couple different things. As we all know, technology is rapidly evolving, it changes constantly. While that project is under construction, technology is going to change. Since we're coming in behind them, it allows us to evaluate technologies a little bit longer and make sure we have the latest and greatest. It also allows for all the base infrastructure to be in place. All those new crossings are there, all the new concentrations that accommodate pedestrians and allow them to cross safely. Those will be in place when we come in. It also allows us to select a specialized contractor who has an understanding of technology and how to implement it and make it function the way it should. A little bit about schedules for these two projects. The Orange Blossom Trail Improvement Project is about to begin construction here in the next month or so. It's going to take approximately 1 year to complete. Our project, the Pedsafe 2 project, will begin design here shortly. It will go out to bid for contractors in June 23, and it will also take approximately 1 year to install. One of the important things we're looking to do with this project and why we're here today and the current phase and state that we're in with this project is we want to talk to the community. We want to get in front of you and understand your needs and make sure that the technologies we're putting out in the roadway are accommodating those needs. We don't want to just put things out and expect you to use them. We want to say, this is what we can do. Is that beneficial to you? Will it help you walk from point A to point B? Will it make your commute safer? We want to get that feedback. We want to dispel myths. And when we talk about technology, everyone has concerns, especially when we start talking about cameras. We want you to understand what that camera is going to do. Show you what that video feed looks like so you can understand, hey, that camera is really not that good that it can see my facial features, but what it can do is it can detect that I'm there and it can actuate that signal. Or it can give me a little bit longer time to cross if I need it. Maybe I'm a little bit slower and need a few more seconds here and there. It can give that to you. And so we want to show that to you. And we're going to do that through some live demos. We're going to use some pop-up events within the corridor so that we can reach out to the community directly in an environment where they feel comfortable. We're also looking to engage schools so that we can get our younger generations exposed to these technologies and get them comfortable with it, because we all know kids take stuff home and they'll talk to their parents about these things. We're going to incorporate some future technologies too. What we showed you is kind of an immediate thing. Everybody wants to talk about connected and automated vehicles, and they're great, but they're still a ways out there. They're still under development. And so we're going to incorporate those things in this project to make everything safer for pedestrians, but also improve the road user, the driver's experience as well. We're going to be able to provide in-vehicle warnings. So if there's a potential for a collision, somebody driving will know a pedestrian has stepped out into the roadway. They can be warned of that. In the future, there will also be smartphone applications where these can be sent to unequipped vehicles, somebody that doesn't have that technology in their car, but they have a phone. They can have an app where they can get the same warnings, but also pedestrians with a phone can get these warnings. But we want to make sure we balance the technology side and the future side with unequipped people or unequipped motorists that don't have those technologies now. These technologies are also going to allow us to do a couple different things with statistics. We're going to understand near misses, which is extremely important because we can look for trends and be proactive with our solutions as opposed to reactive looking at crash data, which is all historical. This will give us real-time near miss evaluation so that we can identify maybe there's not a crash problem, but we know, hey, we've had, several people have had to swerve in this area or take evasive action. So now we know before there's a crash, there's an issue and we can address that issue. It's also going to allow us to look at compliance rates, which are extremely important, is how many people are using the pedestrian features the way they are intended, which again improves safety. And this allows us to do real-time adjustments to operations as needed. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
What does it look like?
I like that.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes for questions. Okay, Mr. McMullen.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. Great. Lots of good stuff. I'm really excited to see all the safety benefits for that stretch in Orange Blossom Trail. I did a safety analysis while interning in Lynx and realized that's the most dangerous segment in the entire Tri-County, and it really needs a lot of safety upgrades, and a lot of the safety recommendations I proposed y'all have included, so great to see that. Also, good to see you're considering getting rid of beg buttons, because I'm not a fan of those. It makes no sense. Cars don't have to push a button for the light to turn, and yet pedestrians do. So happy to see that. My question is, have y'all considered leading pedestrian intervals in your Pedsafe program? For me, as an avid walker, one of the biggest safety concerns is when cars and pedestrians both have the light, cars often don't yield while turning right. So if pedestrians had a leading start to cross the street before cars, I think that would be a big safety improvement.
Yes, absolutely. If you noticed on the slide, that project will be implementing leading pedestrian intervals with the bigger Orange Blossom Trail development project. One of the things we're going to look at as well is, to your point, how do we control vehicles using some alternative configurations of signal heads. If everybody's familiar with the flashing yellow arrow, it's become very common lately. There's potential to use that to control traffics where we can turn off that flashing yellow and actually hold it red during that leading pedestrian interval to allow pedestrians that head start before vehicles can make that permissive left in front of them. We can also do that for right turns, and it looks a little bit different where we have a red indication, a solid yellow indication, and then a flashing yellow indication. And so it doesn't really change how the right turn operates. You still make your stop right on red or your permissive right turn. However, what it allows us to do is, again, during that leading pedestrian interval, we can hold it red and not allow people to make that permissive movement across that leading pedestrian interval, which can be an issue currently without any control or any additional signing to prevent drivers from making that movement.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Cologne.
Yes, I don't know if you'll be able to resolve this question. I'm a pedestrian and I'm legally blind. North Orange Avenue and Colonial State Road 50, okay? Sometimes you gotta wait 2, 3, I've waited up to 4 signals to cross Colonial, 4 times. Now, I spoke to the people working on the lighting system there one time. Yeah, we'll take care of it. I guess they went in the opposite direction, the wrong way, okay? That's ridiculous. They told me cross, don't worry about it. I'm not crossing with a red signal. No way, that's not happening.
Yeah, so
And the other question real quick to tell you is, traffic coming from Colonial on the east headed west. Now, North Orange Avenue is a southbound road. There's a building, a little shop jetting out on that corner there. They need to put a sign up there that says no right turn, because I've seen cars try to make a right turn there until they notice at the last minute, hey, I can't do it, and they jet back out, okay? If you want, I'll give you the $10 for the sign, okay? But they need to put a sign up there that says no right turn. And one final thing, real quick, when they were working on the lighting signal up there, I told them, hey, listen, how about putting signs, you know, what buttons are for what? Oh, we forgot to do it. Yeah, you know, engineers, what are you gonna do? So, if you can get somebody to look at that signaling up there, I would appreciate it, because waiting 2, 3, 4 signals to cross the light is not correct. Thank you.
So I'll speak to that on 2 terms. One, specific to our project, we are looking at some audible tones for people that have visual disabilities. And so we need to be careful with that, because audible tones create challenges as well. What messages do we send out? We don't want to create that deer in the headlights where somebody hears an audible tone of maybe an imminent collision and they just stop. So there is some research ongoing to understand what audible tones will be beneficial to the public so that we can get those messages out there and warn drivers of collisions. There are audible pedestrian signals that provide feedback when you push the button. Those are in place. We're considering those as well. To speak on your other items, I think it was mentioned earlier, a lot of those things, if you notify the maintaining agency, they will address those issues, whether it's going out and looking to make sure that button is working the way it should, or it's doing a study to determine whether or not they need to restrict right turn on red movements. All of those things are pretty standard. We do a lot of those studies through our FDOT contracts. And so if you make the request, you know, that can help with that. But those are some items that we are looking to address with this project. Again, if you hit that button, right, and you don't know if it worked or not, if you have a signal indication light or some kind of beacon that lets you know that it works, it's going to make you feel more comfortable to wait, because at least you know that the button did something. And that can, again, aid in maintenance. If you're hitting the button and the indication light doesn't come on, that lets you know that there's an issue and it needs to be reported to that maintaining agency.
Okay, did you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Collin has touched on some of my question here, how this will work with those folks that are physically challenged or wheelchair bound. there are already intersections that utilize audible tones. So you just continue to utilize that. The other question I have is there any intersections in the Central Florida area or near enough that this is already existing and in use?
So, first part of your question is, yes, we are looking at audible tones, and that's, again, something we're considering. With the passive pedestrian detection, the nice thing about that is not having to really interact with the traffic signal at all. It's just going up to where you want to cross and waiting, and it will automatically detect you regardless of if you're in a wheelchair or able, to walk. So that really eliminates the need to interact with the traffic signal. You just wait to cross, and it will automatically pick up that you're there. Parts and pieces of these things are in place. The passive pedestrian detection is installed, like I mentioned, in the UCF area along Alafaya Trail. It's also installed on State Road 50 in the Pine Hills area as well. That technology is already in place, and so we're looking to expand that and further those technologies. But parts and pieces are installed. The indication light that we talked about, that concept, along with the weight indication, was a concept that was done out in Portland, not local, but it was tested in Portland, but in a different capacity. It was used for bikes. It was used to inform bikes that they had been detected and allow them to understand how long they had to wait. And so we're looking to take that and utilize it in the pedestrian format.
So this is a very new technology. You don't actually have the whole package in place?
No, and that's one of the things we talked about live demos we're actually working on right now, is pulling together these parts and pieces so that we can set up a demo that the public can come out and see. And that allows us to do two things. One is to get feedback on how that works and present it to the public to make sure that it's something they think would be beneficial, but it also allows us to understand how to design it and then construct it so that we can make sure we have the appropriate elements in place and it gets installed properly. So yes, there will be live demos prior to it being implemented at intersections within the region that will allow people to kind of see it up close and in person before it becomes live.
Thank you. I think it's wonderful technology.
Mr. Sabila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my first question was also regarding disabilities enhancement. So I'd love to see an updated presentation that includes some of those solutions once you figure those out. But my main question is, in a recent meeting that I had with our Orange County Commissioner in District 1 and Orange County, my understanding was, and this came up when I saw your diagram for your solution on Orange Blossom Trail, looked like there was a raised table that's part of that. I had heard in that meeting that the Orange County Fire Chief has put a moratorium on raised tables and speed ramps or humps or whatever, because it slows down his fire rescue response time. So I wanted to make sure, is that true, or have you heard the same thing? How are you working around that?
So our project is not directly involved with the design of those speed tables. So I can't speak to design considerations. I know there was a lot of coordination on that project. I recently attended a presentation that FDOT did on this project. The one thing they spoke about, which I can relay, is that I know they were in close coordination with Lynx and the concern that they had on their buses being able to traverse and stop on those tables. And so there was some very close coordination from that aspect. So that I am aware of, but no, that would be a question for that project specifically that would be able to address that.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that had come up, and I wasn't sure if you guys were aware that the Orange County had put that moratorium. So, thank you.
Ms. El-Badri.
Thank you. So this is one of those no-brainer, game-changer type things, and I'm really glad you guys are working on this. I just want to echo some of the other member comments about planning and implementation for blind and sight-impaired folks. So think you've heard that a ton today. I did just want to briefly mention that one of our members is the president of the Pine Hills Community Council. She's not in attendance today, so I just wanted to make that connection. I'm sure she would love to hear more if she's not already engaged in this process.
That is exactly why we're here today presenting to you, because we're looking to get that community outreach and talk to people, you know, and really engage and get feedback, because we feel like it's extremely important to make sure we're not doing things that don't benefit the community. We want to make sure that what we're putting out there, and I didn't speak to this, but one of the other things is we're talking about locations, is, you know, we can identify locations with crash data, but that doesn't mean that's where the problem actually is. But if you walk that every day, you may know, like, yeah, it's real. A lot of people cross right here, and it's really dangerous. There may not be crashes, but there's going to be one soon. And so that's the kind of information we're looking for, is, are we selecting the appropriate locations to target with this technology?
Cool. Sorry, so she's not here, Patricia Rump, but I'm not sure who's going to make that connection between your agency and her organization.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
How do we connect them?
Mr. Chair, I'll be happy at to send these presentations out as PDFs, since we have so much information coming at us today. I was thinking it might be good if I sent everyone the presentations to review, and I would include the members who are not here, and that would, of course, include Ms. Rump and others who may have questions. And then, as I said before, you can, after looking at those, if other things come to mind, you can get back to me. I have Mr. Spatola's information. I have Dr. Yu's information. I can corner Alex and Keith if I need to, and we'll get all your answers.
Okay. Mr. Spatola, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. That concludes our presentations. Thank you for helping us get through this information in a timely way. Remember, if you have questions that you did not get to, let Ms. Horn know, and we will get them addressed, okay? There are several items under the General Information tab 2 in your agenda packets, including information on the emergency tip amendment mentioned earlier. Our next CAC meeting will be June 22nd. We expect that meeting to be in person again. Please remember to RSVP so we know whether or not we will have a quorum. Next CAC meeting dates are in your agendas as well. The next Metro Plan Orlando Board meeting will be on June 8th. Okay. Mr. Caskey mentioned the TIP virtual public meeting that will be on June 20th. So that's there. At this time, do we have any members who would like to make final comments? Mr. O'Hanlon.
Yes, and I think this is for FDOT. Now that the I-4 Ultimate is complete, it is time someone get to Google on their GPS speed limits that are set for all of these cars that use the GPS for speed limits, and have them revise it so that the speed limits are correct. Because there are sections where the road goes in a different right-of-way area and it drops the speed limit to 30. It's going to cause accidents on the I-4 Ultimate. So you need to get in touch with somebody who's actually making the money on this road because it runs freely with no accidents, and explain to them that they need to get Google to fix it. It is very important.
Mr. Badri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really quickly, I wanted to recognize Metro Plan staff for their successful partnership, and thank you for your support of the bike and roll event that happened with Audubon Park Elementary School on May the 4th. It was a really beautiful demonstration project of the complete streets design that Metro Plan did a few years ago. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. It sounded like the community really wants to see action on that project. So hopefully we do see funding for that relatively soon. Additionally, I wanted to share some information about a federal program that I've heard some community members ask me specifically about, but I wanted to share it with Metro Plan, the U.S. Department of Transportation, which I'm sure it's on your radar, but U.S. Department of Transportation is launching the Reconnecting Communities Pilot Discretionary Grant Program. They're going to have a notice of funding opportunity go out later this summer, and the point of the program, which it falls under the bipartisan infrastructure deal, is that the program provides funds to support planning, capital construction, technical assistance to equitably and safely restore community connectivity through the removal, retrofit, mitigation, or replacement of eligible transportation infrastructure facilities that create potential barriers to mobility, access, or economic development. Specifically, as a representative of the City of Orlando, I've heard folks on the west side talk about obviously the barriers that I-4 has created. and potentially what could be the applications of this grant funding opportunity. Again, it's called the Reconnecting Opportunities Pilot Discretionary Grant Program. With that said, one of the reasons why I'm talking about this is because this is my last CAC meeting for the foreseeable future. I actually just moved out of the city of Orlando. I am now a Seminole County resident, and so I can no longer sit in my seat. I'm working with the city of Orlando. I'm working with the city of Orlando to find my replacement. We have some, we're testing the waters with some folks, but someone else will be in the seat come June. I just want to say thank you all for this opportunity. I really appreciate sitting and serving in this role. Thank you so much.
You know, you can always reapply through Seminole County.
That's right. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the service that you've given us in the capacity that you've been here. And it's perfectly okay for you to change seats. Okay. We're now at our second public comment section.
Did you see, I think, Mr. Colon and Ms. White?
Did I miss someone?
I think Ms. White.
We already did
and
Mr. Colon. Ms. White, did we miss you back there?
Yeah. I just want to say, as an appointee, and welcome to Seminole County, this meeting, thank you for the voice of public health. I love to hear the equitable, the inclusion of the community with the Pine Hills person. I shared my journey of riding my bike from the city of Longwood to Lake Mary, and I mentioned some issues about the sidewalk. Call it a coincidence, call it having a voice or at a seat at a table. But within weeks, I saw improvement. I saw the entire street along Ronald Reagan improve. So thank you to this committee. Thank you for the voice. We can call it a coincidence or we can call it action and motion. So thank you for the voice.
Did I see that on social media as well?
You did not see that on social media. You saw some other accomplishments, but not that one.
I saw Ms. White on social media. I told her earlier before the meeting, she is a Facebook sensation now.
Yes.
Mr. Colon.
Yeah, one quick comment for Mary Ann. On the agenda, items are mentioned that they're enclosed. I didn't see them enclosed on on all the items. And particularly, we took a vote on last month's committee meetings, the minutes. I did not see them anywhere. It said tab 1, but I didn't see them. And I like to vote on something that I see, but I didn't vote on that item. So I would like to see that in the future if it's possible.
I apologize if there was, if you look on the short agenda, it's true, you don't see them there. You have to go to the full agenda? Is that?
They're under
what
tab
you
1.
Did, under tab 1? I'm told they are.
Here it is right here.
Mr. Campbell is holding them in his hand. I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me, but
This is the full agenda that I
it
printed.
has to be the full agenda, though. You're right that the abbreviated agenda has no tabs attached to it.
And Ms. White is up.
Got it?
Pardon me?
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
get
we
them
can
for her.
certainly get you a paper copy, if that would be helpful. Okay, we can certainly address that after the meeting,
get it
and
for
we'll
you.
see what's going on there.
Okay, this brings us to our second public comment section. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who'd like to make a comment?
There are no hands raised on the virtual side, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who'd like to make a comment?
We have not received any public comment.
Were there any written comments?
Mr. Chair, we did not receive any written comments in advance of the meeting.
Okay, let me just say thank you again. I know this was a push. If we did not push, this would have really gone on. And like we said from the very beginning, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. And we've already lost a few people because they had to leave. But I want to say thank you for your participation and thank you for all you have done. If you have additional questions, please submit them.
There we go.
Thank you to the entire staff here at Metro Plan for all you do. And with this, I will declare that we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good.